Hello everyone, Britt here from Scrappy Boy Stamps, and today we're going to do a tutorial for the Fairy House Door mini album die. Let's cut our pieces. First we'll cut the main base layer one time, followed by the stitched base layer, which we will also cut one time. Then we'll finish up our larger pieces by cutting the wooded arch one time and the door base one time. Each of these pieces not only cut the shape, but also provide a nice detail of embossing. Then we'll move on to our smaller shapes. For this project, we're going to cut the hanging door sign one time, as well as the frame that goes around the sign, also cut one time. Although I'm not using them in this project, there is an optional window frame and pane that you can cut as well. You'll get two decorative door hinges, which I've cut one time each. This long piece that looks kind of like a hot dog is your door's threshold. And last but not least, these two small circles are the pieces to the door handle. Now that we've cut all of our pieces, let's assemble. Using your favorite adhesive, liquid glue anyone? You'll adhere the stitched base layer to the main base layer. I'm going to use this on a card today, but if you were making a shaped mini album, you would use these two base layers to create your album cover and all of your pages. Next, we'll use our liquid glue to adhere the wooden door to the base layers. Now this layer and the wooded arch really do a nice job of embossing that wood grain pattern into the front. But I did notice as I was smoothing this down that the paper I chose didn't really give me a very good contrast. So at this point I decided a little bit of selective inking was definitely in order. Now I know that inking directly onto a project that you have already started assembling is not everybody's cup of tea. But as you can see as I start inking, that little bit of color that it adds really does make a big difference, and it was totally fine. It's just paper, people. Be brave. I promise it'll pay off most of the time. Once the door was looking more to my liking, I had to figure out how I was going to attach the wooden arch and the threshold. Off camera, I used a cobblestone embossing folder from my stash to add texture to the threshold. And here you see me increasing the contrast by adding a little bit of white ink over the surface. When I planned out this card, I had a really clear idea of what I wanted it to look like. Since I knew I was going to be using the Briar Rose stamp set, I really wanted to depict how magical it must have been for a little girl to grow up with 3 aunts who were actually fairies. I wanted a visual representation of all of the magic that must have always been in the air. So I pulled out my white pigment ink and the Cracks background stencil and did a little selective stenciling in the place where I knew I was going to position Briar Rose. Then I added some white sparkle embossing powder over the pigment ink in order to give it a little bit of shine. Now I know you're wondering, Britt, shouldn't you have done this before you attach that door to those layer pieces? And the answer is maybe so. But at the end of the day, everything was fine and no cards were harmed in the making of this video. Once that was heat set, I tested out Miss Briar Rose and I felt like she didn't have enough magic around her. But not to worry. It was easy to maneuver back into place, and if you just pardon my fluffy bun, you can see that I was easily able to go back in and add a little bit more inking and then a little more embossing powder as well. And there is one advantage of heat setting over something that has 3 layers. I found that the added stability of the layers helped to minimize warping and keep my piece more flat. But if you want to emboss first, you do you, boo-boo. I really love the way the arch and threshold are designed to go exactly on top of the door. As you can see, the door does not create an outline around these 2 pieces. Instead, they fit flush all the way around the perimeter. And while I chose to just pop this up and give a little bit of dimension with some foam adhesive, the design of these 2 pieces means you could easily use the threshold and the arch to create a frame for a shaker card. Now, while there's no real trick to getting this piece on correctly, I did find that it was easier to line the whole thing up if I first aligned the small inward curve at the bottom of the piece with the matching inward curve of the bottom right and left of the base layer. Paying attention to how these 2 pieces fit together right at this point, I found to basically be a foolproof way to make sure that the entire arch was placed correctly. Now, this is a do as I say and not as I do moment. What I should have done was put those hinges on before the arch. Do yourself a favor and put the hinges on before you place the arch. But as always, if you don't, it's okay. It only took a little bit of card surgery, and those hinges were right where they should have been in the first place. You can also choose to put your hinges on the right side or the left side of the door. There is no right or wrong, it's completely up to you. It's nice to have some choices in life, isn't it? Once my card surgery was done, and I had those exactly where I wanted them, I went ahead and tacked them down with a little bit of a liquid adhesive. After you secure your hinges, you'll want to take the 2 small circles that you cut for your door handle, and you'll place them on the opposite side from the side where you adhered the hinges. Feel free to cut these in 2 complementary colors, to add just a bit more dimension to your door handle. But I decided to simplify mine and just do gold on gold. If we were using the little flower-shaped window, this is the point at which I would add it, but I decided to skip it because it works better with this design. You know, I think this little hanging door sign might be my favorite part of this entire die set. It's adorably quirky with its wonky little frame, and it's a really nice size to house part or all of your sentiment, which is exactly what I'm going to do. Off camera, I stamped and colored some of the images from the Briar Rose stamp set, but I wanted to show how easily you can line up parts of the sentiments inside the hanging sign. I found the easiest method was to attach the frame first, and then use a stamp positioner, if you have one, to make sure that I'm lining up that sentiment inside the confines of the frame. Even though you could absolutely do this with a stamping block, I do find this particular kind of stamping much, much easier with a stamp positioner. When it comes to these larger mini book and card dies, I find that the key to getting a lot of use out of them is to play around with all the little accessories and get creative with how and where I place everything. In a design where you would include the little flower-shaped window, it would be very natural to hang the sign from the window frame. But as I start to build my scene, I realize it's going to serve my ideas for this card much better if I hang it from the top of the arch. I know I want Briar Rose to be the focal point of the card and that everything else should fit well around her. So I'm going to pop her up with some foam tape and add her right to the center of the card before I do anything else. Full disclosure, I added more glitter to the cracks and forgot to film it, but all I did was follow the lines with some clear glue and sprinkle a little more glitter. I'm so glad I did. It really gave it that magical pop I was looking for. Before I moved on to building my scene, I wanted to mount the door to the background paper. I also got out a glitter pen. This one's by Wink of Stella. And I added a little bit of a subtle pearly little shine to all of the fairies. The effect of glitter pens like this are a little hard to see on camera, but in person, they really make a difference. And since they were competing with all that glitter on the door and that gorgeous background paper from the Enchanted Forest paper pack, adding that little bit of sparkle really helped them stand out like I wanted them to. I bet you're reading that sentiment thinking, you are my what? And the answer is Magic Spell from the Wicked Wall Mirror die set. I am in love with these big die cut words. And I wanted to show that even though they coordinated very well with the Villainous Bombshells release, that there is absolutely no reason you couldn't use them on the Princess cards too. Each of these words come in two parts. You of course get the word itself and then a shadow layer as well. Not only do all of the words cut out in only one or two pieces, so they're really, really easy to put together, but I also love that the font and the size is bold enough that you don't have to use the shadow layer if you don't want to. Although I don't have any inside information, I hope we see more of these kinds of words in sets coming up for Scrappy Boy in the future. In no time, our words are assembled. Don't lose the tittle. That's that little dot on the top of the eye. It's time to add the rest of our sentiment and finish up the scene. I used quite a bit of foam adhesive on this project, and even though it was mostly just to keep everything very even, I thought it gave everything sort of a floaty movement that I was really happy with. And of course I say that as I mostly add the flowers at the bottom completely flat onto the threshold. But it's okay. I really love those little rose embellishments and I think they could be used on a lot of different projects. Finally, we're going to move on to some finishing touches for this card. I am not embarrassed to admit that I am a little obsessed with shaker mixes. Not only do I love to make a shaker card, but I also think they make really amazing small embellishments. And you don't have to look very hard to find a variety of themes that match pretty much anything that you're going to make. In retrospect, I wish I had used some of the adorable images that come on the Scrappy Boy shaker panel dies, but I think I just got excited about using little stars and moons and flash, bang, boom, before you know it, I had stuck down a bunch of those little clay pieces and there was no going back. Don't get me wrong, I really love the way this came out, but if I had it to do over again, I know there are some really cute images that I could use from those plates. And the great thing about the plates is that you can cut them over and over again, so you never run out of shaker bits. Last but not least, would this have really been complete without more glitter? I think not. I happen to have these little glittery enamel dots, but this could also be achieved very easily with a glitter glue like Stickles. With that last little bit of sparkle, this card is done. I really thought that Enchanted Forest paper pack went well with this stamp set, so much so that I used it on my second example with the Evil Fairy Queen. I tried to think a little bit outside of the box with this one. I cut the door hinges several times in green to use as ivy. And when they're side by side, you can see that actually I eliminated the door completely and used the arch by itself. If you made it this far, thank you so much for joining me today. We love you all in our little crafty community and we definitely couldn't do this without you. If you want more inspiration with this release and all of the rest of our most recent releases, definitely join us on the Scrappy Boy Facebook page and Instagram. You won't want to miss the shop updates, announcements, and daily posts from our amazing design team. These products and other new releases are all available on scrappyboy.com, and you can find the link to the shop, all of our social media, and the places you can find me down in the description box below. And as always, if you're going to remember one thing, remember this. When in doubt, add more glitter. It always works for me. See you next time. Bye.